Hello, everyone, and welcome to the unit on economic and political anthropology. So, we're actually going to start this lecture off talking about gifts. This might seem like a odd place to start the story of economic anthropology, but in fact, gifts and gift giving has been a key theme within economic anthropology since the very beginning. Anthropologists and sociologists have been interested in this question, and more specifically, Marcel Mauss, as we'll talk about in a minute, has been interested in this question. Why is it that humans feel obligated to reciprocate when they receive a gift? What is it about gift giving, receiving, and returning gifts that is so powerful and distinctly human, perhaps? Well, we begin our story with a book titled The Gift that was written by French sociologist dash anthropologist, who's sort of like kind of a hybrid figure, right as these two fields were developing. Marcel Mauss asked this very question in his book, The Gift: Form and Reason for Exchange in Archaic Societies. And Marcel Mauss, after thinking about and reviewing the way that gifts work across, again, archaic, ancient societies and current day, argues that rather than being some sort of pure, disinterested offering, right, rather than simply being a nice gesture, gifts actually, he argued, create social relations of inequity and indebtedness, which he calls mana. So his take is perhaps quite negative in the sense that he argues that in giving a gift, we are creating social relations, but social relations of indebtedness, of inequality, essentially. And he calls that power that one has over another through that exchange mana. He asked, quote, what power resides in the object and the gift given that causes its recipient to pay it back? He argued that people who have given a gift have some sort of mysterious power or moral authority over the person who received the gift. And this kind of moral authority can only be just discharged by returning a gift, right? By reciprocating the gift-giving gesture. So again, Marcel Mauss argues that gifts are central to the creation and maintenance of social and moral relations, that gift giving is a distinctly human experience, and that in giving and receiving gifts, we are creating relationships, right? But for him, these relations are inherently unequal because the receiver of the gift now is indebted to the person who gave them that gift. And they are now obligated to reciprocate, right? To return the gift that is given. And again, he referred to this power as mana. So I have a question for you. Have you ever resented a gift? Was there ever a time that you received a gift that you kind of resented getting the gift? This reference to a peach candle is my reference to one of my favorite SNL skits, a comedic skit. I will put a link to that in our up on Scholar. Again, have you ever resented a gift? I'm not talking about simply like, oh, I didn't like that particular gift, but what about resenting actually receiving a gift? Maybe you resented the expectation that you would reciprocate the gift with one of your own, right? Maybe you received it and you're like, gosh, well, I don't have a gift to give back to that person, if it makes sense, right? It's perhaps doesn't really make sense if it's, example, for your birthday, but then you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to reciprocate that when it's their birthday. Do I even know when their birthday is? Maybe you resent the expectation that you forge some sort of social relationship with this person, right? Maybe you don't consider that person a friend, right? Or someone that's close enough to give a gift, and now you feel like you have to return it, right? Well, I think there's something here, right, that shows how strong these feelings we have about receiving gifts tell us something about the sorts of social and cultural work that gifts do, right? The cultural and social expectations that fall upon the receiver of a gift. So Moss teaches us that there's actually no such thing as a free gift. You might have heard in economics class, there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? For Marcel Mauss, there's no such thing as a free gift because gifts are ultimately about social relations, and they create, as I've already mentioned, these social relations that are ultimately fairly unequal. So to recap, there are three obligations of the gift. First, the obligation to give a gift. Second, to accept, to receive that gift. But third, for the person who received it to reciprocate, to somehow give a gift back in some way, whatever that gift giving might look like. Again, mana is the authority that comes from having a wealth of resources to give others gifts, right? And to force those other people into your reciprocal obligation, right? So the gift giver has mana. They have this sort of moral authority over the people that they gave gifts to. And the person who gives the most gifts has the most power and gets the most mana. Okay. So another cultural phenomenon that anthropologists who study economic anthropology have long attended to, and really this particular topic is both a topic of economic anthropology and political anthropology, is that of the potlatch. So I'm going to have you in just a moment pause this video and watch two other videos. Again, the links are up on Scholar. Both the first link to a Kwakiutl potlatch is a documentary with video footage of early kind of Kwakiutl potlatch footage. Again, this is a ritual practice found in indigenous communities in the Pacific Northwest in British Columbia, Canada. Okay. And once you finish watching that clip, I'd like you to watch the second clip, which is of a contemporary current day potlatch. Okay. So go ahead, pause this video and watch those two other videos. So as you saw in those two clips, the leader, the chief, is giving gifts away to the people, right? We see this in particular in the first clip. Now, chiefs giving away gifts like this to their people is a kind of perfect example in Maussian terms of why they're not simply doing this because they're nice, right? In giving gifts to the people, they now have some sort of moral authority or power over their subjects. Their subjects are indebted to, right, to their kindness, quote unquote. But you also see in that second video, the contemporary potlatch, just how holistic of a ritual the potlatch is. You remember what holistic means? This brings us way back to the beginning of the course, right? Potlatch is, where, showing us or telling us something about economics in this particular society, but it's also telling us something about kinship, right? If there's baby naming going on. It's also telling us something about the arts in terms of oral tradition and performance, right? So again, when anthropologists study a phenomenon, a ritual like potlatch, we have to study, we're looking at religion and economics and kinship, all of these things at the same time. Economic anthropologists have argued that potlatches are adaptive, right? This is a ritual practice that allowed people to kind of survive harsh winters, for example. But it also allowed for the chief to maintain their power. And again, Mauss says that gift giving, as seen in this potlatch, is holistic. It has implications throughout all of social life. According to Mauss, a potlatch would be seen as what he called a total social fact, meaning that it's something that is just real to people, and therefore it's real to us as anthropologists. Okay, I will continue this lecture in part 2.